Hello everyone, friends. Real Steel is in touch. Alexander Evsev and I, as before. And today with me in the studio, Dmitry Nikiforov, trainer of champions, so to speak, in Saya Rus. He has 200 to 500,000 wards who constantly win something somewhere and take the season in full swing. But you still found the time to come, right? To take the time to talk about an interesting topic. The topic of weight loss. It's probably always going to be relevant, isn't it? And so here is a common question. I am quite sure you have encountered this with your trainees. The diet is being followed perfectly, but the weight simply isn't moving at all. And as far as I know, so to speak, it is not always because the diet is not being followed, right? There are various different reasons why weight might plateau while on a diet. And it is quite an interesting topic to explore. Let us break this down further step by branches, why it seems like a person claims to be on a diet, but why might they not be losing weight in a specific way?
Let's lay out the branches right away so we can understand, like Xena, the main branch. So we're assuming that the person is truly sticking to it and not cheating. And let's consider the scenario where someone is following their prescribed protein, fats, and carbs by the numbers. They see that the numbers add up, but at the same time, the weight is either dropping very slowly or barely changing at all. There can be a wide variety of different reasons for this. The most well-known reason and the most significant and impactful factor of all. These are, often completely unaccounted for calories that a person doesn't notice or realize. In other words, these are unintentional errors and discrepancies in the counting itself. So they record a product thinking it's correct, but in reality, the actual energy value of the product is different. This could be because, for example, they record part of the product in its raw form and part of it in its cooked form. So a bit of confusion starts to creep in. This might also be due to the fact that during the process of tracking or recording products or something else, I'm going to mention every possible scenario here, even the most ridiculous ones, like broken scales, for example. One of my athletes actually had this happen. Her scales were showing the wrong weight for the product, so she was just entering the wrong weight in grams.
That's an interesting point. Sometimes it's just something simple, like the scales are broken or the battery is low.
That's what happened to her then.
And you only need about 100 to 200 grams and all of that stuff.
So it turned out that she arrived at the championship. Someone else and her friend, who lived with her in the same apartment, started weighing her sheets and said, "Something's off with yours. Look, I put mine on, and yours, it shows like 40 grams. But look how much rice that is." She asked, 40 grams? Really? And I confirmed. She pulled out her own scale, and we realized she'd been counting everything wrong during her prep. I mean, I don't know if it was done intentionally or not, but that is the fact.
If it's meant to be 40 grams, but she piled on half a kilo and was like, "Oh, well, that's 40 grams. It's just my scale."
I'm joking, of course. You can see it. It's quite obvious.
She sets down a bucket and says, "That's 100 grams. That's it. The scale says so."
You can't visually distinguish 100 grams of rice from 120. If you measure wrong from the start, you won't notice.
Yeah, and day after day, a little more, a little more. And that's just for one meal. But if you have 5 or 6 meals, and every time it's the same...
And fats too.
Yeah, and every time it's just a little bit, and in the end, I don't know, you could be off by 300 calories. Roughly speaking, that can have a serious impact.
And these 300 calories are actually a very interesting point, because as a coach myself, I'm more or less reasonable. I try to create a gradual deficit, and a small one, that is. I don't just cut 1,000 calories right away and throw someone on a diet. And just when you slightly reduce food, you watch the changes in body shape. And if the person makes these small mistakes, you end up at zero. That is, you cut 300 calories, but Nastya actually miscalculated. So it's 300 calories per day. That's not a noticeable amount. In terms of food, you won't even see it. If you add oil everywhere, there you go. There's your 300 calories. And this is the biggest mistake right now. At this very moment, the most significant concern is that athletes have begun to focus excessively on counting their calories, specifically by utilizing mobile apps. Let me explain what I mean. Instead of monitoring their progress by looking in the mirror and checking their weight, how much food is on the scale, how much I weigh on the scale, how I look in the mirror, they started living differently. How? Okay, so I have 200 grams of carbs here, for example. I don't care. If the app says 200, then it's 200. But the app can be misleading. For example, in our Photo Secret app, you enter pasta, please. There are a huge number of different types of pasta there. People enter it manually and incorrectly or inconsistently. The app might show 200 grams of carbs, but in reality, it is actually much higher.
By the way, yes, here's the thing with the app. It's very convenient, very much so. But how much is it? How accurate is it? For example, do your athletes use the app?
Yes, they do. But my athletes use the app for tracking the food they've eaten, not just to enter numbers from the top of their head. Let me explain. They have proteins, fats, and carbs listed, and they enter their food into the app based on those values. But we try to constantly monitor their food choices because when you have a buffet, the margin of error increases dramatically. We fully understand that in 100 grams of rice, there are not always 70 grams of carbohydrates. It could be 75 or it could be 68. So this number, it changes depending on how much we have there. Mother Nature put energy into each grain, and only the Lord God knows exactly how much. No one else knows. And in one grain, there might be a bit more, in another, a bit less. It's the same with all food products. That is, the caloric value that was invented for food products is a very abstract concept, which has its own specific reference values. It's just that no one indicates these reference values on the packaging. There's no such thing. It might say 350 calories per gram of rice or 380. They write 70 grams of carbohydrates. But this caloric value is approximate. And the more varied your diet menu is within, when discussing diet, it's vital for health. In bodybuilding, health is rarely the focus because the goal is maximum leanness. In other words, you have to create all the conditions to strip off as much fat as possible. And here, when they set up a buffet, they've got protein bars, bread, mayonnaise, and something else. So now you see, with all this propaganda, we're told we should eat as much as possible. Whatever we want, we just log it and eat it. Beer, drink it.
Creamy mayonnaise.
Eat it. Vitamins, minerals, macronutrients. Yeah, that's right. They don't see it from a health perspective, like, I want to get macronutrients into my body. They see it purely as a source of pleasure. So they pile on the bars, something else, pasta, and so on. They notice that the pasta is really tasty and start to think something's off. It can't be that it's actually this delicious. It says this much anyway, whatever, I'll just write that down. A normal bodybuilder eats, and if his diet is really tasty, he gets suspicious. Something's not right. It's like his homemade food tastes like a restaurant's. And it's precisely because this buffet style is now constantly promoting an abundance of food, like, don't worry about what you eat, you'll lose weight anyway. This is exactly where these small problems start. They're minor, this surplus is small. But when you have a deficit of 300 calories, and you can easily overeat those 300 calories with this thing, so the problem is that the manufacturer themselves doesn't know exactly, in detail, how much it's going to be. The most recent thing we looked at was the Sauschkin product, thyroid, cottage cheese. Yeah, Sauschkin product, I think that's what it's called. And these little cottage cheese cups, the small containers, it says, like, on the packaging itself, 4 grams of carbohydrates are listed. But when it was tested in the lab, it was 8, sometimes even 12. So that's a big difference.
That's really already, look, that's already touching on a slightly different topic. First of all, the first thing is that the more varied your diet is, on one hand, that's good from a health perspective. On the other hand, the more varied your diet, the higher the likelihood of errors in counting calories. For example, I remember when I was preparing back in Khrushchev's time, back in those years for competitions, there were 5 foods. I don't know, just boiled chicken breast, boiled just a piece of it. No, mess that up. Just a piece of boiled meat, breast. I would just pull it apart along the fibers like this, and eat it plain with nothing. That's it. 2 dozen boiled eggs, a pack of cottage cheese without the yolk, yeah. The last one with the yolk, a pack of cottage cheese, there's protein in that. That's it, 5 foods. A mono, a really strict mono diet where it would be almost impossible to mess up.
You can't mess up anywhere. It's impossible.
It's just impossible, yeah. And that's how we were taught. That's how the older guys did it back in the day. Chicken breast without the skin and, like, not boiled in 2 waters or anything. Boiled. I'm still from those times, basically, all those stories. On the one hand, yes, variety is good for your health. On the other hand, there's a higher chance of making a mistake. If you're counting everything yourself, for one, but again, more experienced athletes have already learned how to count hidden calories anyway. But, for example, for the average person, just someone who wants to lose weight, hidden calories, because we also need to come back to the issue of products. Those hidden calories, like a bit of oil, just a little spoonful here and there, a splash of syrup in your cappuccino, a quick drizzle, all that, he doesn't really count it, then throws in a handful of nuts. I don't know. These hidden calories are so basic, so dumb, but they're still so relevant today.
You see, when we eat, our body feels full when the stomach walls are really stretched. That is, the receptors react and say, okay, that's it, stop, you're full. But when you just drink a liquid, nothing stretches now. Well, it happens just like that, with a snap. Stretches a little, then immediately goes away, that's it. So you can't get full from water. It's a bit easier with carbonated water, but that effect goes away quickly because the gas leaves. And so When you happen to consume and ingest what you call hidden calories, it's exactly the same with coffee, even if you just add standard whole dairy milk and a little bit of sweetener. Not even 0 calorie, but as you mentioned, things like Jerusalem artichoke syrup, all of those different flavored syrups, or various other types of additives.
Great if you can find that in a coffee shop. Some places strive to use sweeteners, but usually they're just regular sweet sugary syrups. A cappuccino, 400 milliliters or 300, for example, with milk and syrup. How much? About 300 calories, I think.
For 30 kopecks.
300. For 30 kopecks, if you drink 2 cups a day, that's 700. Just like that.
And a person won't feel any satiety from that at all.
And sometimes, well, honestly, they just don't even write it down.
If you don't feel full, you might not record it. The best example from my own country was butter. So now, science has made everything so easy for you, not just science, but manufacturing as well. You've already come up with these special dispensers for frying. Go ahead, use them. But still, to this day, people just pour oil straight onto the frying pan.
I even stumbled across a scientific study in a journal recently. I think it clearly demonstrated the noticeable difference over a full month. Just like that. You turn the bottle and brush it on with a pastry brush. And the difference over a month, if you do this every day, how much you... Thousands of calories, I think. I won't lie, but it's several thousand calories just because you turned the bottle over the pan and brushed on a couple of drops or sprayed it. Over a month, that's a difference of several thousand calories, literally just from a single action.
For example, I can tell you about my own family. In my family, everyone used oil all the time, and our bottle would be gone in the shortest amount of time. Now, the same bottle has been sitting there for about 5 years, and it's still there because you just don't even have time to use it up. Nowadays, you can use frying pans without any oil at all. The coatings are really good now, and we're not cooking on cast iron anymore either. Plus, in the worst case, you just take a brush and lightly grease it. So let's put it this way. When preparing, I didn't fry food, I stewed it, I just cut the chicken, throw it in the pan, cover it with a lid, and it's done. If needed, use a grill or oven. You have all the options, and you don't need oil for that. Not only do people use oil just like that, but they also tend to add a little bit here and there, even in salads, without really counting it. That's also an important factor. People also throw in all sorts of sauces. For example, those balsamic ones that are made with sugar, not just the vinegar, but balsamic sauces. They also give a really strong flavor. So people try to make their bland food as tasty as possible. But you can only make it really tasty if you increase the calorie content. If you give a girl the choice between a Snickers and a protein bar, she'll pick the Snickers. Yeah, the protein bar, well, she'll eat it, sure. The protein bar, of course, there's protein and all that, but it's just not as tasty. Everything we try to trick, hide somewhere, reduce the calories, make it denser, healthier, add more vitamins and minerals, stuff it in, it just won't taste as good as if you simply spread regular Nutella on bread, and that's it. So all these structures, everything related to hidden calories will result in, even according to the app, for example, someone made it themselves, right? I've come across this too. They open the app, same thing, right? Like with pasta, you said, right? And there are 10 different kinds of pasta. And instinctively, you'll probably tap on the one with a little fewer calories. Yeah. You know, like pasta this, pasta that, pasta something else. Damn, I made it myself. With potatoes, that's a common problem now. Yeah, the way mine are and the way they are here. So, well, I guess I'll just pick the ones with fewer calories. But in reality, it might actually be the opposite. There could be more. It's the same with potatoes. So when someone logs potatoes, they pick the lowest value. They find numbers like, just so you know, 12 grams of carbs, 10 grams of carbs. I mean, the main thing is that the app shows it. That's what I'm saying. People have started to trust the app more than what's actually true. Because everyone tries to trick themselves using their own logic, even though it's pointless. So the problem is that the app was originally created for convenience, not for people to blindly trust the machine as much as possible. This machine was also created by a human, a person who entered the data there. There was a moment, I take a screenshot of a product photo and it adds the food for me. Buckwheat, everything, it just goes on and on. I see something's off with my Budge, something weird is going on. So my carbs are fine, but my fat shot up to almost 120. I'm thinking, what is this? I start checking the app to see what's wrong. I see that next to the buckwheat, it says 85 grams of fat. I'm thinking, what the heck is this? When I took the photo, I didn't check what was in it. When I took the photo, there was a little bottle of testosterone in the background, and it counted it as oil. So when I took the photo, I didn't check, but it says chica pie. So some idiot just entered the barcode emblem itself under CHKP, and that's it. Probably not on purpose, most likely by accident, but that's what happened. So you just delete it and enter the product again properly. So with this app, you have to double check everything. It's the same with chicken. You take a picture of chicken. Sometimes it shows 0 fat. Sometimes it says 10 grams for chicken breast, not drumstick, and so on. The app was made by a person, so you must double check everything. You take a picture and verify it, or you can enter the data manually. You double check, but the app is just a starting point. There are various production errors and mistakes, whether intentional or not, because individuals often do not want to double check. They use outdated reference books and manuals or old data, for example. I mean, on the boxes, jars, bottles, and packets themselves, it says Kabju. How much can you really trust information like that? For example, for me, the biggest example is this. It's those same snack bars, in my opinion. I've even come across this myself somewhere that, well, sometimes they're just insanely delicious, with nuts, chocolate, nougat, caramel, everything. But then you look at the ingredients and, it just seems kind of suspiciously short, right? Either because it's supposed to be a fitness product. That is exactly why I sometimes think, in my personal opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, that the manufacturers of these popular sports treats might be deliberately understating the calorie content. Sometimes it's unintentional. For example, someone is producing something. They're producing, say, the same buckwheat, and they look it up in reference books. There are some values there, so they enter them. But in reality, their specific type of buckwheat hasn't had that calorie content for a long time or something like that. This all concerns production at factories. We're not talking about the sports industry right now. Take that cottage cheese, for example. These mistakes aren't made on purpose. They're errors in the production process. No one calculates the protein, fat, and carbs for every individual cup. It's a factory, a huge vat somewhere. Cottage cheese is being mixed together, so to speak. Then all of it gets packaged into cups. Only God knows how much ends up in your particular cup. That's it. No one else knows. No one else knows, and no one is going to control that. To live strictly by the numbers, you'd take every food item you eat to a lab. That's one. Every grain of rice on your plate would have to be taken to the lab as well. That's two. They just take you to a mental hospital. So we have to understand that there's always a margin of error. Even at the legislative level, our manufacturers are allowed a clear margin of error, 20%. In other words, manufacturers can be off by about 20%. Why? Because they themselves don't know how much that grain will yield, how much cottage cheese will end up in that cup, how much will go in there. Because everything gets mixed together, but you understand that for everything to be mixed perfectly, on a chemical level, it's impossible for everything to be distributed exactly evenly. So even when, for example, you bake bread yourself and calculate everything yourself, and you need to eat a certain piece of it, you subtract that piece, but you won't get perfect values. Because in this part, there might be a little more, in that part, a little less. So obviously, it gets a bit ridiculous. But the point is, when we talk about dietary variety, the more processed the food is, the higher the margin of error in terms of what actually gets put in there. Well, the proteins, fats, and carbs might not be exactly as stated. Well, the same goes for animal products. Eggs, yes. Fish too, where it was raised, where it was bred, whether it was farmed artificially. That probably has an effect as well. Look, let me put it this way. Everything that's less processed, eggs, fish, chicken, all of that, there can be some discrepancies there, but they're really minimal, just tiny. So looking into that is just pointless. It's a waste of time. But when it comes to things that are processed, like refined products, highly processed foods, in other words, when you buy regular pasta versus instant noodles, for example, in instant noodles, there might be a bit more inconsistency in the protein, fat, and carb content than in regular pasta. Take those noodles and examine their ingredients, grains, flour. The margin of error will be even smaller. The closer something is to its natural state, the fewer changes exist. And
Should you actually calculate it? Raw or cooked?
raw.
Because even now
But labels are always based on raw products.
people still keep asking these questions. Guys, you need to count based on the raw product, not the cooked one. But
The manufacturer lists the calorie content for the raw product. So if you calculate it from the package, say it says 70 grams of carbs per 100 grams, that's for the dry product. They don't list it for the cooked product.
food, you know how people say chicken breast. So I cut off 200 grams of chicken breast. I weighed it, but then I boiled it, damn it. And it wasn't 200 anymore. It was 120. How does that happen? Why should I count? How do I log it if it became 100 to 120? For example, it shrank, dried out. That's why people just don't get it here.
Yeah, but the protein hasn't changed its structure. It just coagulated. So, as they say, there's less of it because the water disappeared. But you have to understand that the manufacturer lists the protein, fat, and carbs, taking into account the moisture content. That's how they indicate it. If you want, you can easily, nowadays, no one stops you from going to the factory, to the production site, These days, just so you know, almost every factory offers its own mini tours. They cost next to nothing, about 300 rubles. You join a tour group and they take you through the factory, showing you how they process the chicken, how they cut it up, what they feed it, and what they inject. No one hides the fact that they spray it with special water through special nozzles to make it swell up. No one tries to hide this. This is allowed within the production process. That's how it should be. That's just how things are. As for the concerns regarding them trying to deceive and manipulate suppliers with the chicken's body weight, I certainly agree with that point. But you really have to understand that when the chicken actually arrives at the retail store, it comes thoroughly chilled and the amount of liquid that has been injected into it is extremely small and negligible. Basically, whatever you threw out of it, that's what leaked out and that's it. Everything else is just the broiler itself, the chicken as it is. It's not pumped full of water, that's just the type of chicken it is, nothing more.
By the way, this right here, I've heard stories that they're all pumped full of antibiotics. As it turns out, that is even considered to be a key part of the various stages of raising them. If you do not feed chickens specific types of medications, well, then we'll die. Yeah, we'll die. And the whole flock, basically everything will die. If one chicken gets sick, the whole factory is screwed, so to speak. And the same goes for people. If you eat contaminated meat, that's why it is one of the essential steps in ensuring the safety of meat, those same antibiotics.
In the production process, the use of antibiotics is mandatory. They don't give them any hormones, that's just a myth. Otherwise, chicken would cost not 400 rubles per kilo of chicken breast, but right now, chicken breast, it would cost you around 5,000 if they were injecting it with hormones, especially if they were using growth hormones. I can just picture it. Every chicken getting a shot of chizantropin before bed so it absorbs better. And regarding hormones and everything else, you have to understand that in production, God forbid even one chicken gets sick. As you said, the whole plant would die. Those are just huge financial losses. If that chicken gets sick, but let's say it doesn't die, it infects the other chickens, then that chicken gets slaughtered and brought to you, and you eat it. If a village dies out, it's no big deal. I've already talked about this. So if someone in a village dies, they just surround the village, burn everything, and that's it, no epidemic. But if it happens in a city where millions of people live, it will be a huge epidemic disaster. Basically, there will be a major epidemic, and our medical infrastructure simply won't be able to handle it. And
hey, do you remember recently they showed on TV that someone ate a bat? There was something like that, right?
of course, if the factory itself makes a mistake, naturally, there's nothing you can do about it. But again, you shouldn't look at it that way. Now, everyone will be thinking, damn, what did he say? You can't trust anyone. No. Remember, there's always a margin of error. It's always been there. When you were preparing and when I was, you started much earlier than I did. You just couldn't diversify your food choices like that. So from the start, you had less chance to mess things up.
There wasn't even an app like Fat Secret back then.
Of course. So how did it work? You just put the food on the scale and then looked at your reflection in the mirror. To lose weight, you simply cut food more until it worked. It was very simple.
It just went on. It's one thing when a manufacturer makes a mistake unintentionally, but it's another thing. There's a whole story about that, for example, with protein powders. Protein is really popular now, and everyone is getting checked everywhere, and they are right to do so, even to the point of being funny. 3 to 5 grams per...
Well, this is already funny, I agree.
This is when the manufacturer himself actually understates...
Join now?
Yes. Because, for example, athletes, they take sports supplements, and protein is counted as part of your macronutrients, right? And for example, you calculate that your scoop contains 25 grams of protein, and being a responsible guy, you put in 2 scoops, 50 grams, and log it for yourself. But in reality, there are only 10 or 15 grams, for example. Does this actually happen? Or there are 3 to 4 times more carbs than stated?
That's more of a problem for us right now. Since I started delving deeply into the topic of sports nutrition, I had some thoughts about maybe opening something up, taking a closer look. And the biggest mistake we have is that if, for example, let's say Savushkin product does this by accident, not on purpose, but just because that's how it happens. But they don't write on the packaging, like this is exactly how it is, and as if it's for weight loss. They have everything within the factory standards. But in the fitness industry, everything is done completely differently. They deliberately hide the calories, especially like, we have one company very well known for their bars, the most famous one for bars, and they specifically the carbohydrates. The ones that are actually digestible, they list them as indigestible. So it turns out they write digestible carbohydrates, 3 grams, indigestible 58.
Like fiber, right?
Yes, 58. And just recently, a study was published specifically about them, and they took the bars to a lab, checked them, and it turned out that they actually have 10 grams of indigestible and 40 grams of digestible carbohydrates. Well, that's a huge difference. I mean, can you imagine 3 versus 40? That's a massive difference. And in this situation, when people start munching on these bars, they really do eat them. Few athletes buy and eat just one. Usually it's 2, 3, 4, an entire pack. You stuff yourself with the pack. What do you do then? All right, I won't eat more. A friend brings more and it starts all over again. So no one stops at just one. Everyone starts eating them in large quantities. But they only pay attention to what's written on the package.
It says so, yeah.
It's the same with protein. But with protein, it's much harder to figure out. If it's a bar, well, let me put it this way. I'm extremely negative about protein bars because you can actually make a good bar. You're just being an idiot. Just list everything properly, how you made it all. Let it say there are more proteins, fats, and carbs. Let it say there are more carbs, more fats, but at least the person will understand that this bar matches those macros and that's it. What they're doing is deliberately deceiving people so that they buy their product. With protein, they do this not so much for weight loss, but to make the raw materials cheaper.
Yeah.
So they dilute the protein, they use WPC, like for example, 80%. And out of those 80%, they throw away half and add soy. Or instead of buying higher quality protein with low carbohydrate content, here's a good protein, not even an isolate, just not an isolate. We take regular protein. Ideally, that's what good protein is, good protein. We're not even talking about isolate right now, just good protein. That's 4 grams of carbs per 100 grams. If we go for isolates, it's even more expensive. Those should have up to 2 grams of carbohydrates per 100 grams of product. And now, if you take protein from almost any company, I'm not even going to talk about what's being sold now on Ozone or Wildberries because that's just total junk. We used to buy from a company that was called in Russia, Maxler. Now it's called the same, but it's not really Maxler anymore. People need to understand that. I'm just saying this, just in case. So the problem isn't that Maxler is messing up. It's just that as soon as the market left, people learned to counterfeit everything instantly in just 2 seconds. That's it. And nowadays you can create packaging, order it from China, stick a label on it and fill it up. All of that can be done in 2 seconds. Especially if you have some factory capacity available. So what do we see there? It says 4 to 5 grams of carbs, but when we run lab tests, it turns out to be 18. Let's put it this way, 4 and 18, that's a huge difference. And in the context of everything, now we've taken protein bars, the whole sports industry. If you look at it, there's dozens of times more deception there than at a regular factory that produces things like chicken, cottage cheese, or something else. And they do this deliberately to make money and to attract customers so that people buy from them because the macronutrient numbers are so low. So in reality, if you take a good protein bar and say a Snickers, their calorie content will be almost the same. It's just the protein ratio that's different.
Even in that very same Snickers candy bar, I think there is actually either 3 or 5 grams of protein in there. But when you look at the bar, it says, if you actually look at the bar itself, the difference in protein is just a few grams, 80 grams, yeah? You know, you might get only 7 grams of protein by eating this entire snack bar, and you think to yourself, oh, it's a healthy protein bar. It's definitely going to make you feel happy now.
No, it's mostly just marketing, nothing more. And also, people psychologically perceive this as something safe and that as something dangerous. And then they start binging on it, but in reality, it's all the same thing. Trusting the ingredients list on bars, cookies, all those snacks, let me put it this way. That's just complete idiocy. Protein, yeah, that's a much more complicated topic. We have companies in Russia that make pretty decent food products, but I can't vouch for them right now because that's just for now. Right now, the pendulum could swing the other way. They might take advantage of their popularity and good sales and then ruin the product just to make more money. And then it will be a different quality. That's why when people ask me what products I would recommend, I can't say at the moment. I know there are guys who do things well, but it's hard to say how long they'll keep it up.
Mistakes in self-calculation, app errors, unintentional mistakes by manufacturers, and then there's fraud, intentional deception by manufacturers. And just imagine all these factors come together within a single athlete and a single training cycle. And real problems can arise during preparation because you might be sabotaging yourself without even realizing it. But there are also other factors that affect weight loss, not just those related to calculation errors or manufacturing mistakes. Some hormonal imbalances, some slowdowns in the weight loss process that are specifically related to current health indicators also affect this. It seems like the person is honestly following the rules, counting everything correctly, not entering it into an app, but writing everything down the old-fashioned way, copying from the label by hand. Are there any other factors?
Take, for example, the human thyroid gland. That is certainly one of the most clearly visible indicators of a slowdown in the fat-burning process. We'll go into more detail in a moment. It's not exactly that the thyroid gland is to blame for everything here. When the overall thyroid function drops, after that, the primary result is not so much a noticeable slowdown in fat burning at first, but rather a significant decrease in the person's natural inclination to move, hypodynamia. You used a good word there. On a diet, any athlete's thyroid function will decrease. For anyone who is not just losing weight, but going beyond physiological norms, beyond just slimming down to clinical standards, we need to get ready for competitions. We lower our body fat percentage and move away from normal physiology, lower and lower, going further into the negative. And that's when our thyroid function will really start to drop. Along with that, the thyroid gland slows down, leading to what's called hypothyroidism. Physical activity decreases across the board, but the person mentally keeps track of their cardio and monitors their workouts. So they know they absolutely have to do an hour of cardio, and they also have to complete however much training is required. And then the most energy-consuming thing a person does during the day is their general daily activity.
If you look at the breakdown of energy expenditure, non-exercise activity, that's this much, and the workout is just this much. Like, just this much, yeah. The most critical factor is actually those 20 long hours every single day, when they are not physically training at the fitness gym. That's the main time when a person burns the most calories. And as I understand it, if there are issues with reduced thyroid activity, essentially, he would just sit for an hour talking calmly, for example. If he felt normal, he might gesture, stand up, or fidget restlessly. That's absolutely right. Like something, I don't know. And when he just spends that hour just sitting like this, right? Mumbling something, spacing out. Yeah. He would have burned just sitting on a chair, let's say 100 calories or 130 calories, for example, without even noticing. In an hour, that's in an hour. And somewhere, for example, he might have run up to catch a bus.
The speed will decrease as you move along the street. That's important. Then your heart rate will also drop. Because your heart rate will drop. In other words, look, you can walk 20,000 steps with a heart rate of 120 or 110, let's say. And you can walk those same 20,000 steps with a heart rate of 75. So that's the difference at 100 and the difference at 75. The heart rate will also be different, and the energy expenditure will be different too. So that's all part of it as well. And the further you move away from physiological norms, that is, as your body fat percentage decreases, the less your heart rate zone will be created. Raising your heart rate is harder because your body seeks homeostasis and balance. It's as if your body asks, why move so much without food? Let's slow down. So I'll lower your heart rate and I'll try to make you use less energy internally. And so when we start, for example, to go on a diet, we end up spending about 1,500 calories, spending them ourselves from the outside. So for example, we eat 1,000 calories, but we spend 1,500. By the end, you eat 1,000 calories, but only burn 1,000. You can't make up the gap. An inexperienced person ignores this factor. Where he walked, he stands. Where he stood, he sits. And where he sat, he lies down. That's it. In other words, the more we lose body mass, or the closer we get to reducing our fat component, the more our activity level will drop. Everything that's tied to emotional actions, like you said, gestures, conversation, emotions, will start to lose. Well, when someone's on a diet, any kind of emotion, there's just a zombie walking down the street. That's it. All he thinks about is eating, just sleeping, and even napping during the day. At night, he can't sleep because he's stressed out. And the next process is exactly this kind of stressful thing. Like, for example, because of a severe deficit, because he's not controlling his thyroid, his cortisol shoots up, plus he's stressed at work, he's not sleeping, maybe his wife is getting on his nerves, or vice versa, he's getting on hers, it doesn't matter. A lot of internal stress appears. And what will internal stress do? It will lead to fluid retention. No matter what, cortisol goes up, water gets retained. Then because of this unseen process, that is, a person is on a diet, the weight should be going down, but it's not. And it's not because of fluid retention. The person sees that the weight isn't going down, and because of that starts getting even more anxious. And so this boomerang effect keeps spinning endlessly. That is, as soon as you throw it, meaning you start a diet, and it comes back to you with swelling and your weight doesn't change. And you see this and wind yourself up even more because of it. And you might cut your calories even further. Yes, you reduce your calories even more. Sooner or later, obviously, you'll lose weight, you'll waste away, you'll die, but that won't be a real physique. It'll just be a wrung-out, soulless creature stepping onto the stage. You know when people say someone looks empty with no muscle, nothing at all, just a herring standing there on stage? That's what it'll be like. The process of losing weight isn't just about creating a diet, and that's it. You need to monitor your hormones. You have to keep them in check. It is not because your hormones are preventing you from losing weight, but because they are vital for improving your overall well-being. And if you're feeling healthy and balanced, it's much easier to maintain your diet. Furthermore, as we've already discussed today, there are also some basic external factors and circumstances. These are often simple, somewhat silly things like mistakes made during the preparation process or just basic mistakes. When counting, there are also factors related specifically to your psycho-emotional state, including cortisol levels, water retention, and also physical inactivity. The scariest thing is not even that we don't understand all this, but that they do understand. For example, he doesn't realize that a decrease in everyday activity can mean burning 200 to 300 fewer calories. Again, we're using that number, but it's real, right? That's a very important number. And if you add up 200 to 300 calories within your diet, plus you made a mistake somewhere, plus the manufacturer misled you, plus you miscalculated here, and that's it. And so you get a combination of factors that really leave people confused, that make them start to get anxious, that make them, hello, what the hell is happening to me? Coach, we're not losing weight here, basically, and all that. Such things. Simple factors that it seems a person is calculating correctly. And the simplest one is probably when a person is lying to you. That's the simplest case, and it's easy to deal with. When someone is lying to you, you can see it in their physique. That's it. A person who made a mistake in their calculations, you can also see it in their physique. It's not like when someone is lying to you, at least it's clear what's going on. Yeah, exactly. You can catch them red-handed, so to speak, and say, shame on you. But when a person truly believes they're doing everything right and still doesn't succeed, that's even worse. Because then you have to figure out where you messed up. I even had a case with you with the protein bars. There was an example where a man was consulting with me and he said, I'm on protein bars, and for some reason things just weren't working out for us. I was just sitting there not even thinking about him, and then suddenly damn protein bars came to mind. I immediately grabbed my phone and texted him, Volodya, how many protein bars do you eat a day? And he said, well, like 4 or 5. I was like, no way, let's just cut them out. And I was just sitting there thinking about something else. And then suddenly thoughts about him popped into my head. Protein bars. I said, protein bars. We cut out the protein bars, and I don't even know what was behind those bars. I sent it over, and it actually worked. Our numbers started going down. Because those 4 or 5 bars a day, plus another mistake of about 50 calories per bar. And there you have it, right? That's it. 250 extra calories if you're not in a strict or extreme deficit. So you can break even, and that's it. Everything stops. If you add a sedentary lifestyle on top of that, then everything changes. I liked how you said it's about the combination of factors. So viewers shouldn't just focus on the protein bar as an example. You have to understand that a single protein bar, let's put it this way, people don't get fat from eating protein bars. People get fat because of what they eat overall. Obviously, it's completely different foods that are the real issue. But when we're talking about weight loss and considering all the factors together, sedentary lifestyle, thyroid issues, for example, or low testosterone levels, the result will be exactly the same. As you said earlier, if a person lacks testosterone, they'll also end up in an apathetic state. And because of that apathy, they won't want to move or do anything at all. It's one thing when you're in a good mood and you easily walk your 10,000 steps, for example, and quite another when you're trying to force yourself to do those 10,000 steps. After an episode like that, you don't even want to live anymore. So when you put all these factors together, they all end up affecting that very instability when in your mind you think everything is fine. Let me give you an example. I have an athlete, she's preparing, everything's great, we're working on her physique, and then we make a small mistake. The physique suddenly turns out kind of lousy. I mean, really lousy shape. And the person is sticking to their diet, everything's fine. But our problem was something else. We were using pharmacology that wasn't really effective. Because the pharmacology wasn't that good. It's not that the physique got worse because of it, but the training loads were huge and she just wasn't recovering enough. So the gear just started to be wasted. Even a factor like that can play a role. Of course, this doesn't apply to absolutely everyone because not all of us use pharmacology, right?
No, we've only heard about it ourselves.
And seen it somewhere.
Seen it.
At competitions. Those guys, they love to do that. These are
just disgusting people, nasty types. And they come out, take all sorts of substances and more. Then they perform almost naked in their underwear. And
because the gear was completely useless. It simply didn't work. That's it. We're waiting for the test results. Our SHBG is perfect, just like a normal person's. All the test results are perfect. That is nothing. SHBG didn't drop. Testosterone didn't go up even a little. Everything is just perfect. And then we wait for the DHT results, and DHT is within the normal range. For the first time in 4 years, I mean, it was always around 500. For us, it was 700, 750. It was always somewhere in that range. And we look, and it's something like 98, I think. But for someone who's on pharmacology, that's, well, it's unbelievable. The body just can't function that perfectly when you're on hormonal drugs. We understand that the issue isn't just that these injections caused a bad condition, but rather that we were using junk. The person was also training very hard. The body wasn't recovering enough. There was a lot of internal stress, accumulated fatigue, let's say, and the body just started to shut down all the time. That's all there is to it. Because the person says, Dima, I feel really bad. I'm having these pre-fainting spells, but the person isn't even in a deficit. So even factors like that matter. You really have to monitor everything from all sides here. And when people ask, what should you do? A small deficit is important. I agree with that. But even with a small deficit, you really have to take everything into account here as well.
For many, is it easier? Extreme shortage. That's how it is for me. I know I was just eating a 2.5, bam, 1.5. Endure. If you have the strength, I, for example, can endure. For example, like when I go on a diet, if I really want to, I have a competition. Yes, I don't care at all. Damn. But for some people, really, I can't. It's very extreme deficit for me is when I have these 200 to 300, then you have to adjust again. Then
for me, like gaining 500, I immediately make it 250. And on those 250, I go straight on stage. That's it. But you could do it, like 450, 400, 300, and then you look, okay, it's fine. Just cut a little bit more. I set the goal for myself. The second time I went on stage, I was on 250 grams of carbs. I realized that that's comfortable for me. And so for my next third season, or maybe the fourth, I immediately told myself, okay, that's it. I'm on a diet, 250, and off I go. I get in shape in 2 months, sometimes more, and then I go on stage.
Who is this approach suitable for? This is suitable for aspiring athletes, but we also have to consider people who just want to lose weight. Here, extreme methods probably aren't the way to go. Gradually, yes. Probably not, because there are a lot of factors at play here, including psychological aspects.
Few endure it.
Yes, not everyone can endure it. Just endure it. This is the disciplined path of someone losing weight, but not everyone gets that. If it were that simple, then probably these things wouldn't exist. All of these stories about different diets and all sorts of invented miracle pills. Don't eat after 6, eat after 7, eat at sunset, or don't eat at sunset. It is just all of those same kinds of stories. If it really were that simple, everyone would know the one right method and wouldn't be making all this stuff up. All these rituals and dances around how to actually lose weight. Because for many people, honestly, it's just plain hard. That's it. So friends, I hope we've highlighted some points you should keep in mind when you realize that your weight isn't going down, even though it seems like you're on a diet. And maybe someone watching right now is thinking, this is probably about me. I eat 5 bars a day, or like pancakes. Or maybe really there's something wrong on the label, or I'm entering things incorrectly. Like when we talked about intuitively entering lower calories on purpose, pressing the button, yes, it's possible. Maybe some of you do that. And for someone, it might be helpful to understand why their weight is stuck, or whether it's related to physical inactivity, because you've been on a diet for 5 years already, and your thyroid has taken a hit. For example, your hormones are low. Accordingly, there could be a very serious problem here, and you really feel terrible. You can't even get yourself up just to walk to the local store, so you end up ordering food delivery instead, so to speak.
Plus,
and before you used to walk to the store yourself, but now you've started ordering delivery because you just don't feel like it anymore. Here you have 500 meters there, 500 back. There you walked a kilometer, burned calories. Otherwise, you didn't spend them. It all adds up, and therefore the process of losing weight seems to be simple. Maintain a calorie deficit. Nothing more is needed. But there are many different pitfalls that come into play here, which should also be taken into account. Friends, leave your comments. Who among you has faced a problem that we discussed today, and by solving it, your weight started to go down? Maybe it was really helpful for someone. I'm sure someone heard something that was specifically about themselves. Dim, thank you for coming and taking the time. Our regular guest, always grateful that you come and find the time. And you, friends, don't forget that all the useful links are in the description. Go check them out, leave your comments. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Do it for your brother. This was Living Steel. Bye.